Good morning, MozCon. How's everyone doing? Good? How's this side of the room doing? Good? And this side of the room? Awesome. Sorry, no one cares about the rest of you, so. It's interesting, I was watching the talks of the MozCon speakers last year, and what I found is that when the speakers came on stage, they typically said one of two things. First, they would come on stage and say, "Can everybody hear me?" Which is kind of an ironic question to ask, I think. And the second thing they would say is, "I am so excited to be speaking here today." And I'm in that latter group. I am incredibly excited to be speaking on the first day of MozCon, but largely because it's the first day of MozCon. How many of you have ever given like a public talk or anything like that? About half of you? So you know, generally, you want to be speaking as early as possible, and there are two reasons for that. The first reason is that if you speak very early on, everyone knows who you are. And the second reason, which is even more important, is that if it's a multi-day event, like MozCon is, then you can really enjoy the after parties. And from what I've heard, MozCon has really amazing after parties. Last year, they had a rock band in a museum, which sounds kind of amazing. But did anyone ask, why does Moz have a rock band in a museum? Or more importantly, why do all these organizations spend so much time and so much money having these really amazing after parties? And the answer, as most of us know, is that after parties are this incredible place where we can connect with one another. We can drink some alcohol, we can have shared experiences, perhaps not so good on the dance floor, but we can really enjoy ourselves. And it has a business benefit as well. This year I hosted my first conference in London. It was the third year the event has been going. This was my first year doing it. And what I found is that 87% of the people that attended the after party last year attended the event this year. 87%. That compares to around 50 to 60% on average. But what's even more interesting is not just that these people attended, is that the majority of this 87% signed up the day we announced the event. They signed up before we had announced the venue or the speakers or anything like that. They signed up before we had, or they had, any idea what they were signing up for. And why were they doing that? I think the answer is because they were attending that event because it's part of their community. They were paying to be part of that community. It's funny, I was warned about speaking at Moz, actually. I was warned about all of you guys here. I was warned that because the background of Moz is in SEO, that a lot of you guys wouldn't be building online communities. How many of you are not building an online community at the moment? Quick show of hands. How many of you are building an online community at the moment? How many of you just don't like being asked to put your hand up? There's a big secret about online communities that we don't tend to talk much about. And I've been working in online communities for 10 years, and I've been studying the return on investment of maybe 50 to 60 online communities. And there's this big secret. And that big secret is that most online communities are a waste of time and they're a waste of money. Most online communities, especially those started by organizations, don't succeed. Most online communities don't reach that critical mass point. Most online communities don't deliver a positive return on investment for their organization. Unless they have one specific thing. And if they have this one specific thing, what you tend to find is that the community is not only more likely to succeed, it also generates a very positive return on investment for an organization. What happens if you have this one specific thing, you find it's far easier to get that community off this ground. And what you find is that if you have this one thing, it's a lot easier. And for my business, it made it a lot easier to build communities for our clients. 5 years ago, we had a success rate of around 65%. That was considered high for the sector that we work in. Today, it's 95%. And it's 95% because we apply this one specific thing. And that's a sense of community. A sense of community, clarified by these two men here. A sense of community is a combination of 4 specific things that you can drop into any particular group to build a powerful sense of community. And it's a sense of community that correlates strongly with every positive benefit that we want from a community. It's a sense of community that leads to customers that are more loyal, that purchase more from us, that have higher retention rates. It's a sense of community that leads to customers advocating more on our behalf. They feel a sense of community with that particular group. It's a sense of community where you have higher levels of people that are exchanging information with one another. It's a sense of community where you have high levels of productivity from your employees. And it's the sense of community that has higher levels of employee retention as well. And I'm not making this up. I have references. And it's also the sense of community where the members inside them are happier, they're healthier, and they're wealthier. So it stands to reason, if we can build a powerful sense of community among any of the groups that we're in, we should generate a lot of benefits as a result of that. And what I think is that every single one of us, every person in this room right now, is a part of a group that would benefit from having a much stronger sense of community. And so today, I'm not going to talk to you so much how to build an online community. I think that's important, and you can apply a lot of the things to that. I'm going to tell you instead how to take any group of people in your life, any group of people that you might meet in the future, and develop a powerful sense of community among them. Now, doesn't that sound like much more fun? Yes? Yes? I'm so glad you said yes, or the next 25 minutes are really awkward. So the first thing you need is a boundary. You need membership. You need people to know who is in that community and who isn't. And it's that boundary that separates insiders from outsiders. You simply cannot have insiders unless you have outsiders. And the higher the boundary, the more difficult it is to get into that community, to be accepted as a member of that group, the stronger the sense of community that people have with one another. And we very much want to be part of groups where we feel a powerful sense of community with the other people in that group. A friend of mine was recently disappointed that he was accepted into Menza, which, as I'm sure a lot of us know, is a society for the people that score in the top 2 percentile in an IQ test. And he was disappointed because he wanted to be accepted into the 999 society, which is for the top 0.1% of people, and it has around 1,200 members. And I bet there are people in the 999 society that wish they were in the Prometheus society, which is for the top 0.03% of people, and has around 120 members. And I bet there are people in the Prometheus society that wish they were in the Mega society, which is for the top 0.001%, and has around 26 members. And this goes all the way up to the Terror society, which is for the top 0.00000000000000001% of people. It's a society that's so exclusive, it has no members. Even the founder can't get into that community. And we see this happening in so many other situations as well. If you want to join the most exclusive club in London, the most exclusive private members club, you have to be nominated by 2 of their existing members, which basically means being nominated by 2 billionaires, and pay them £10,000 a month, just to pay them more money in the future. We want to be part of exclusive groups of our peers. We see this happening in organizations as well. In 2011, Fortune magazine reported that Apple had a top 100 group, that every year Steve Jobs and the gang would take the top 100 employees, not the people at the most senior level, but the people that had the most potential in their future career prospects at Apple. They would take them away to Camel Saddle Ranch or somewhere and build a powerful sense of community among them. They would show them the latest products and the latest services. They would build a powerful sense of community among that group. And we see it happening on the internet as well. Last year, we launched a community just for the top community professionals in the world. And what we found is that when we launched a community for the top community professionals in the world, all the top community professionals in the world wanted to join it. And the easiest way, actually, to get a community off the ground today is to create these exclusive groups. People want to be a part of exclusive groups. No one doesn't want not to be accepted into that exclusive group. So what we want to be doing to create this powerful sense of community is to understand what our existing topic is, and then create a group within that. Because we cannot have insiders without outsiders. And that means we need a set of rules or a boundary. We need to create that boundary. And that boundary is usually based upon our demographics, our habits, or our psychographics. That means our demographics, who we are, age, gender, location. Our habits, what we've done, what we can do. And our psychographics, what we like, what we don't like, and our personality appeals. Let's try an experiment. Raise your hand if you have more than 10 years of experience in SEO. Okay. Raise your hand if you have more than 12 years of experience. Okay. So if I was going to create a powerful sense of community amongst you guys right now, and by the way, I think Moz has an incredibly strong sense of community. What I would do, I would take all those who just put their hands up, I would take them into this imaginary room over there, and I would say, listen guys, we're going to create an exclusive group just for the experts in the space, just for the people that have the most experience in that space. There are too many newcomers that are coming in right now that don't really know what they're talking about. And then I'd come back into this room, and I would say, let's do this. Raise your hand if you have less than 5 years of experience in SEO. Less than 3 years. Okay, so I take all you guys into this imaginary room over here, and I would say, hey, at the moment, we're going to create an exclusive group just for the people that are new into the space, just for the people that can breathe fresh ideas and fresh life into that sector. At the moment, we have too many old-timers that are selling their ways, and we want some fresh blood here. Now, what have I done? Besides being a manipulative bastard, what have I done? Well, what I've done is that I've created 2 separate groups. Each of those groups has a strong boundary. They know what it takes to be accepted as a member of that group. And most importantly, what I've done is that I've created a common enemy as well. And you can repeat that trick so many times, people based in New York, San Francisco, whatever. But we want to be creating groups with 2 qualifiers, a community for X who do Y, a community for SEO professionals that live in Seattle with more than 10 years of experience. And the higher that boundary, the more difficult it is to be accepted as a member, the easier it is to get that community off the ground. And what we've seen a lot of, especially in the communities that fail, is that the organization will try and have a really big launch. They'll do a big marketing push, a promotional push, they'll do press releases, they'll tell everybody, join our online community. And it turns out that this fails. Every big online community begins as a small online community. Every big online community that we see today began quite small. And how small, you ask? Supposedly. How small is that we found that you can build a community with around 15 friends in that sector. That means 15 active friends. And I know the question that comes up next. Well, Rich, I don't have 15 friends in this sector. Make 15 friends in that sector. And I mean that. I mean, before you launch a community, before you try and get people connected, go out there and make those 15 friends within that sector. Because if you can't make friends with them, how are you going to get them to participate in that community? So you want to launch small with people that are actively your friends and are actively participating within that community as well. And then we want to look at rituals and traditions, because we know that every strong group ever has a lot of rituals and traditions. In northern Spain, you have mums that hold down their kids so they can't escape, while men dressed as the devil jump over them. You can look this up, I'm not making this up. And that sounds like kind of an extreme ritual, right? But not quite as extreme as wearing the gloves of bullet ants for 10 minutes without making a sound. Do you guys know what bullet ant is? It's supposedly the insect with the most painful sting in the world. So they have to do it without making a sound, and then they have to do it another 19 times. This is an extreme ritual, so I wouldn't recommend that for your groups. What I would recommend instead is that you try and think, what ritual and tradition can we bring in with the groups that we have? So for example, we often work with communities of profession. And one of the rituals that we've seen work incredibly well is to ask people when they join the group, what is the biggest mistake that you've ever made in your career? What is the most humiliating thing that's happened to you in your career? Because the ritual is supposed to be a little bit hard, a little bit difficult. But what a question like that also does, and the reason why it works so well, is that it makes us just a little bit vulnerable to that group. It makes us just a little bit open to being emotionally open towards that particular group. We've had stories where a lady hit her boss's car on her first day of work, which is really, really funny. I mean, bad for her, but really, really funny. And it's so much easier to do that than have an introduce yourself area of the community. So we want to have strong rituals and traditions within that community. We want to be actively introducing them. We also want to have a common place. There's a lot of research that exists that says that if people meet in the same place all the time, that their familiarity with that place transfers onto the people that they're meeting in that place. And what that means, if you meet in the same place all the time, you can build a much stronger sense of community with the people in your life. Now, you can go elsewhere after you meet them, but if you meet in the same place, it has a much stronger effect. And for many of you, that will be an online place. We know in the age of WhatsApp and all the other technologies that are out there right now, it's easier than ever to build a powerful sense of community, to find that common place where people can come and interact with each other. So you need to have a shared place. And that place is going to be an incredibly important place. It needs to be a common place where people can identify a place with that particular community. And we also find it's important to have a common narrative for that community. Most people here know the history of Moz, right? Most people here know, Moz started by the blog and the consultancy by Rand, and then it expanded into SEO tools and inbound marketing. And because people know that history, pretty much everyone I've met here knows that history, then they can identify their own place within that history. They can identify where they fit into that place in that history. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. When people know the history of the group, they can see how they personally can contribute to that group. They see where they fit into the history of that particular group. So we want to have a common narrative, and a narrative that's interesting as well. What are the biggest successes of your group? What are the biggest failures of your group? Who are the top members? Who are the people that have really made a difference in that particular group? And we want to make sure that when a newcomer joins that group, that they learn that history. If it's an online community, you can have an epic community history. If it's an offline community history, you can talk to these people. You can find an opportunity where you can tell them a little bit about the history of that group. The more people that know the history of a group, the stronger the sense of community they have with one another. So we have our members. Next, we want to create a powerful and a shared emotional connection between them. We want them to feel that they have a strong emotional connection to one another. What that means is that they oscillate at the same emotional frequency, which means that they're happy and they're sad and they're angry about the same things at the same time. Back in 2008, I was working in New York from September until November. So this was the election cycle in New York. And it got to election night. And my friend Josh, he dragged me out to Times Square. And, I'm from the UK, so it doesn't really affect me that much either way, to be honest. But I found that I began getting caught up in that crowd. And I remember when Obama won Ohio or whatever, I'm like, yes, Obama's won Ohio. And then, that moment when Obama is announced as the president-elect, I find myself going, yeah, yes, we can, yes, we did. It makes no difference to me. But I get that because we get caught up in the emotional connection of that crowd. And when we feel that shared emotional connection, as everyone that was in Times Square did that night, we have a much stronger bond with one another. And we can create, and we can, to a certain extent, manipulate that emotional connection that people within our particular groups have. One of the easiest ways to do that is to have a unique shared experience. So by unique shared experience, we mean something that's completely unique to that particular group. If you're wondering what this picture is, it's from a sport called chess boxing. What is chess boxing? Excellent question. Chess boxing is a sport where you have to beat your opponent either on the chessboard or in the ring. So when I moved to London back in 2000 and whenever, I've noticed that there were the chess boxing world championships. Yep. The chess boxing world championships were taking place in London. So I reached out to a couple of people that were in the community space, and I asked them, do you want to go to the chess boxing world championships? And we went there, and it was ridiculous because it's chess boxing. But what we found is that afterwards, we had these in-jokes that formed within our particular group. We began keeping each other updated on the latest chess boxing news. And as dumb and as frivolous as this sounds, and believe me, I know how dumb it sounds, especially when I say it to a group of 1,300 individuals. But as dumb as that sounds, it creates an incredibly strong sense of community. We have in-jokes, we have that history. When a newcomer joins our group and says, how do you guys know each other? We can say, well, from chess boxing. So we want to be creating those unique shared experiences. You can have common things that you want your group to solve, common issues that you want to tackle within your particular group. There's not a group that exists today that can't have at least some sort of unique shared experience. And if you can't find anything, then find small victories that you can turn into big things. Are there any cricket fans in the room today? You guys might want to leave, because I'm about to be really offensive about cricket. So you guys might not know that there is a tournament between England and Australia called the Ashes. It's a two-team event. And back in 2005, something amazing happened. England won. For the first time in 26 years. Now, there might be some nations on the planet that might think that winning a two-team tournament for the first time in 26 years isn't something you want to draw a lot of attention to. That's not how we roll. We have a massive celebration about it. We give the captain a knighthood of the realm, because that's what we do. And it sounds quite dumb now. But if you think of the context at the time in 2005, it's after the London bombings had just occurred, and we needed something to feel good about. And we took this relatively small thing, unless you're a cricket fan, in which case I apologize, but this ridiculously small thing, and turn it into a big victory. And we can do that within any particular group. There'll always be people in your group that are getting married, they're having kids, they're changing jobs, they're launching major projects, they've published books. There'll always be things within your group that you can let the rest of the group know about. And what you find when you do that is that they feel a sense of ownership and connection with one another. And it doesn't just have to be good things. We've also found that emotional connection works on the vulnerability scale. So a friend of mine runs a community for people that are affected by cancer. And what she found with this community was that even though people were talking about things that were quite emotive, they weren't really getting much value because they were holding back from talking about the things that they'd really get value from. And what we recommended that she do was to push it all the way to the edge, increase that emotional safety from here all the way to here, to talk about things that are the hardest things to talk about for that particular group, perhaps end-of-life planning or hygiene issues or the loneliness about it. And what she found when she did that, when she pushed it from here to here, is that not everyone wanted to talk about the things over here, but what they did want to do is talk about things at a greater and greater depth. They saw those sorts of discussions. And as a result, they felt a stronger sense of connection with one another. They felt open and they felt comfortable pushing that level. And people get far more value out of those sorts of discussions within a particular group. And this works in other sectors as well. In any group, when you can push that, when you can push their discussions all the way to the edge, some things that are the geekiest or the most hardcore things possible, you'll find that increases the emotional safety of that group. I have absolutely no idea what current detection with an Allegro ACS 756 on an 80 Mega 328 means. No idea. But if I was an electrical engineer, if I was on the Element 14 site and I saw this, I think, I get this. This is a community for me. This is a community that I understand, that I can see those sorts of discussions and realize I can talk about the most geekiest things that I can possibly talk about. There are only so many places in the world where social care workers can complain about a decision that a government has made. And this community is one of them. Now again, from the perspective of conveying information with each other, or valuable knowledge exchange, a discussion like this has absolutely no value whatsoever. But from the perspective of bonding people into a strong group, from making them feel that they're feeling the same emotions at the same time as one another, a discussion like this is incredibly powerful. They get to share their emotional connection with one another. A quick show of hands, how many of you have seen the Star Trek film Into Darkness? How many of you have been to the Wikipedia page of Star Trek Into Darkness? Really? How many of you have been to the talk section of the Wikipedia page for Star Trek Into Darkness? That's so sad. But if you haven't, then you guys have missed out, because you would have missed out on a 40,000-word discussion about whether to capitalize the I of the Star Trek film Into Darkness. 40,000 words. These Wikipedia editors, they had a 40,000-word discussion. Now, for most of us saying normal human beings that didn't put your hand up at the last point, that's insane. But for the Wikipedia editors, if you love arguing about grammar and syntax and all that stuff, this is exactly the sort of discussion that bonds you into a powerful group, right? This is exactly the sort of discussion that you want people to be participating in. What they decided, by the way, is that they were right and the people that made the film were wrong. What we also see is that self-disclosure discussions are the most powerful discussions to build people into a strong peer group, to build those connections. Can everyone close their eyes for a minute? It's cool, I'm not going to do anything weird, I swear. Okay, now think of a moment when you revealed something intimate about, you guys have your eyes open. Now think of a moment when you revealed something intimate about yourself to someone else, a friend, a lover, a colleague, or anything. I'm betting that what happened is that you felt a stronger sense of connection to that person afterwards. You can open your eyes now. I told you I wouldn't do anything weird. What happens is that when you reveal something intimate about yourself, you feel a stronger sense of connection to someone else. If you look at how friendships and relationships develop, what you find is that the first two people meet around a common topic or common interest they have, and they start to interact, but they're just polite. And what you have to do is push through that politeness phase a little bit. So you start revealing something about yourself, what you think about on a particular topic. And when you do that, and when that happens in a big group, you feel a much stronger sense of connection to that entire group. That's why sites like PostSecret and their community is so interesting. So that when you read someone's biggest secret, you feel a much stronger sense of connection to them. And we find that the best discussions, the discussions that you want to be initiating and highlighting and encouraging in your particular communities, aren't those where people reveal the best information. They're those that bond people into a group. They are those that build a strong sense of community amongst that group. And those are usually based upon our demographics. So what we've done, who we are, our habits, the things that we like to do, or our psychographics. So what we like, what we don't like, the types of personalities we are. When you initiate these discussions, you start to build that sense of community at a far greater level than you otherwise would do. And if you still can't think of a discussion, you can just steal them. You can go onto any online community that exists. You can go to any other meetup group that exists. And you can go to the forum or the community page or whatever. And you can click on the area where you can list the discussions by the number of replies or the number of views. And what you'll find is that this gives you the list of the most popular discussions that have ever taken place in that community. So you can find the things that people love to talk about. So if we're using this site, the student doctor site, as an example, what you find is that the most popular discussion that has ever taken place in this community is, if you could do it again, would you? If you knew everything that you knew now, would you go through medical school again? Now think about that. From a self-disclosure perspective, that's an incredibly powerful discussion. Where people get to know each other, get to bond and connect, that's an incredibly powerful discussion. It's these types of discussions that bond people into a group. So you can take those discussions and apply it to almost any sector. If you knew what you knew now, would you become a lawyer or an accountant again? Or quick show of hands, if you knew what you knew now, would you become an inbound marketer again? Really? No one? Wow, that's really awkward. I'm so glad you guys are here. So that sounds a bit dark, stealing discussions. Not quite as dark as the reasons why people tend to participate in a community. There are thousands of community organizers in America today that are banging on doors trying to get people to come to their local meeting to discuss the future of that community or to improve that community. There are hundreds of organizations in America every year that launch an online community where people can connect and can share information. But only a few dozen of these will actually succeed. And the ones that succeed realize something incredibly important. They realize that although there are communities that succeed for the altruistic motivations that people have, generally, the reasons why we participate in a community is because we want to achieve a positive distinctiveness amongst those we consider our peers. We want more power, more influence amongst those we consider our peers. And we tend to do that in one of two ways. First, we copy what someone else in our peer group has already done. And you see this happening a lot. Second, we find our particular niche, or niche if you're American. Happy 4th of July, by the way. You find your particular niche, and then you use whatever skills and experience you think you have to help build your positive distinctiveness. And if you're trying to build a group, then there are lots of things you can do. One of the most important things you can do is try and get people to reveal what makes them interesting. But the problem with that is if you ask someone what makes themselves interesting, they tend to really struggle with that. When we hosted our event this year, I remember I thought I had this amazing idea that would kickstart a ton of conversations of. I asked everyone just to write one interesting fact on their name tag, just one interesting fact about themselves. And what I found is that people freaked out. They absolutely freaked out. Oh my God, I have to think of an interesting fact. We had a line of people that couldn't think of an interesting fact about themselves. I saw 4 people at that event whose interesting fact was, I can't think of anything interesting about myself. But you understand that. You have to walk that fine line between bragging about yourself and not being dull. So what you can do instead is ask people about their experience and their expertise. Everyone can talk about their experience and expertise, and once you know that, you can help them apply it to their particular group. In fact, one of the best ways to get people to participate in a community is when they join that group, put there on the registration form or whatever else, what can you offer this community? And the reason why that is so powerful is that this question makes people think, what can they offer that community? It psychologically primes them to participate in that community, not just to consume information. And if you can't do that, you can use labeling theory, which is the idea that people become the labels that we put on them. So for example, if I went to this half of the room and I said, I've noticed that you guys are enjoying this talk. You guys seem to be way more interested than the other half of the room. I can see that you're really engaged, you love the speaker, you love his accent, you're really enjoying this. And then I went over to this half of the room and said, you guys don't really seem that engaged in my talk. You guys are below average here. You're not really paying that much attention. It's not really going well. What would happen by the end of this talk is that you'd see that this half of the room would actually become more engaged, and this half of the room would become less engaged. I was going through this talk with my friend Natalie yesterday, and she warned me that just putting these labels on in this situation was a dangerous thing to do, because some people might actually become more or less engaged. So please, it's just an experiment. You can still give me great ratings on that half of the room. So once you know what makes someone unique, once you know what their skills and experience and expertise is, you can find ways where they can apply it to that particular group. If you have a friend, for example, that is an expert on wine or whatever, and you're meeting up with a group of friends, you can ask them, is there anywhere you would recommend? Is there any place that has great wine? Then immediately they feel like they can influence that group. Immediately they feel like there's something that they can contribute to that particular group. So we want to be creating these opportunities where we can be positively seen amongst our peers. You want to be asking in your community, does anyone have experience in X that could do Y? Because a discussion like this encourages everyone that has experience in whatever X is to do whatever it will take to make them help out in that particular group, to help someone else out in that group. So we're going to be creating lots of these opportunities. And when we do create those opportunities, we want to give a lot of recognition. We want to give a lot of efficacy to the person that does it. We want to make sure they stand out. That's why asking people to show off what they've done is a very powerful thing. It's a kind of discussion that works out in every particular group. Everyone can show off what makes them unique within their peers. Or asking people, or having a member of the month, or asking people interview questions, interviewing people that have used their experience and expertise in some particular way is an incredibly powerful thing. And I truly believe that every single person in every single group has some unique experience or expertise that they can apply to that group. If you've been living in your mum and dad's basement for 20 years, you have a lot of expertise of what it's like to live in your mum and dad's basement for 20 years and how that is relevant to your group. If you were to initiate a discussion about how introverts get started in a group or in this topic, then someone like that might be someone you want in that community. And the only people that ever participate in a community, the only people that ever participate in a community are those that feel like they can influence that group. And the moment we don't feel we can influence that particular group, we stop participating. So what have we done so far? First, we created that group within a group. We created that powerful peer group where people can connect with one another. Second, we had rituals and traditions. We created these simple rituals that newcomers have to go through when they become a member of that group, something that's very fun and interesting to participate. Third, we created that common story for that group, that narrative, that history of that group. So every single person knows where they fit into that history and how they can have experience and expertise. Then we had that useful knowledge exchange. We had these unique shared experiences that people can participate in. Next, we had those groups that we were pushing towards having those self-disclosure discussions. Discussions where we reveal something about ourselves, something that's really interesting about ourselves. We can talk about the things that we can only talk about in that particular group. And finally, we made sure that every single person in the groups that we're involved with is very sure that they can use their experience and expertise, the things that we think make us unique, and we can apply them to our specific group. And I swear to you, if you do this, you'll build communities that aren't just a group of people that are interacting online or offline. You'll build communities where people feel a genuine sense of community. And that has an incredible, powerful benefit for organizations, and it absolutely changes the world for people that are in those communities as well. And that's why I do the work that I do, because I think it has incredible benefits to everyone involved. And that's why I hope that some of you will do it as well. Thank you very much. It's been amazing to speak to you guys. Thank you.
Okay, so 15 people is what you said would be a great place to start with building your community. Invite 15 people, is that right?
Yeah.
So what happens when you get a larger community? Moz has a very big community. When do you know that it's time to create another one or a subset within that community, or is that even a good idea?
Sure. So what you don't want to do is have the organization where different groups in the organization are competing with each other for the same members. You only want the same audience in any one particular group. So what we're trying to find is what in the demographics, the habits, or the psychographics of that group makes them feel unique. So if you were to go to anyone and ask them, who do you feel are your peers? Who do you feel a strong sense of connection with? Who do you look up to? You would find out who they consider in their particular group, and then I'd build groups around that. What you want to do as a community grows is build a lot of smaller subgroups. And that's how you keep activity high. The biggest mistake that a lot of very large organizations make is that they don't break it down into smaller subgroups. In a very large group, not everyone feels like they can have influence in that group, right? But if you break it down into smaller subgroups by common interest or by the demographics or the habits or the psychographics they have, it's a lot easier for everyone to feel that they can influence whatever smaller group they're in.
Cool. Let's take a question right over here. Oh, got the mic on?
Says it's on. All right. So first, happy 4th of July to you too.
Oh, sorry, can't hear you.
I said first, happy 4th of July to you too. Second, I'm a director of search optimization for an addiction company. We have treatment facilities all throughout the country, but within our facility, in our space, addiction is a very sensitive issue. So as you build out an alumni community, you have two sets of people, those that are very proud of being alumni and overcoming their addiction, and you have those that like to remain anonymous. So as you build out the community, I guess my question would be, how do you track that behavior from those that wish to remain anonymous and then move into that community of those that are now proud of their sobriety? And how do you, in general, just track that space in between within your community?
If I understood correctly, it was very hard to hear up here, I'm sorry. Two different communities, very different groups. One's very proud, one wants to remain anonymous. And how do you track those two in tandem and with different goals for those communities?
That sounds like a very unique group. What we tend to find with the groups that we work with, are you talking about their own goals, like the unique goals that each group has?
So yeah, you would have unique goals for those that remain anonymous and those that have unique goals for those that are very proud about their sobriety, but mainly that behavior in between of going from being anonymous to being very proud and tracking that behavior in between and creating that sector of community, I guess, going from one to the next.
Well, basically what you were saying, two different communities with very different goals.
So the question is, sorry.
Yeah, how do you track and measure that?
How do you track what the goals of each community is? Well, the easiest way is just to ask them, right? To ask them what they hope to get out of that community. One of the things we find works incredibly well is that on the registration form itself, or whatever process people have to go through to join, is not only to ask what can you offer this group, but also what do you want to get from that group as well. And what that tells you over a period of time is how those goals change, what people want when they join that group. And we find that a surveying technique that is representative of the group as well works incredibly well. With the organizations we work with, we tend to do a survey once every 6 months or so. And we ask them a bunch of questions, like also how to measure like the sense of community. We have a process we use for that. And we try and ask them a bunch of questions of what they hope to get out of that group. And we identify what common clusters tend to emerge from that. I hope that answers the question. So.
Rand.
Hey, buddy.
Rand Fishkin.
Hey, Rich.
Hey, Rand.
You did a great job, man.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I didn't recognize you yesterday.
Oh, no, that's fine.
It's really awkward.
The mustache hides the
it was
whole
a mustache.
face, so you can't tell who I am. I'm curious about your thoughts on Haterade, the you know, the liquid
On what side?
bottling of hate on the internet. So in particular, and this might be somewhat specific, but over the years, right, in our early days as Moz as a community, we tended to be very transparent and publish commentary, you know, on our blog or in our forums, regardless of the positive or negativity of those comments.
Yeah.
And over the years, we've grown to be more, sort of have more of a code of conduct and say like, hey, if you're just flat out insulting someone, we're going to remove your content. We don't want it. But I'm actually kind of curious about the psychological principles and biases and effects that you've seen, because I've gotten the sense recently that when I see an emerging community start to have haters and detractors, that it almost brings the rest of that community together.
Yeah.
Is that something you've observed as well?
What I've seen from your work especially and talking with some members of your team is that what you've done, and I think you have done a terrific job. Can we get a round of applause for Rand, actually? Okay. What I've seen is that the different ways to build a community. Like if you build a community based upon things that people like and they tend to respond the same way. If you make it an open, transparent thing, you tend to attract people that want that. But over a period of time, what's going to happen in any particular group is that the sheer size of that group is going to attract people on the fringes or have negative personality types that are going to want to cause trouble. And there's no real way of getting around that. I mean, you can have hurdles that they have to jump through, but after a certain size, you're going to start attracting those sorts of people to join the group. What I have seen is that if you talk about things that you hate, or if you're ever in a situation where you're projecting hate onto any particular group. I mean, here, like a common enemy is fine, but I'm not saying you should go out and hate them in any particular way. But if you're projecting hate, you are essentially have a hand grenade that you're taking the pin off and just throwing out into the audience. That's a visual for you guys. And it's hard to know where that's going to end up. And I mean, there's two extreme ends. You have like the 4chan side who let absolutely anything go, ever. Then you have maybe a Stack Exchange over here that have incredibly tight, restrictive rules. And the community and the personality tends to reflect the people that you tend to attract. That makes sense? So Reddit attracts people with a particular personality type. 4chan attracts people with a particular personality type. So for you, if I were you, I'd just keep doing what you're doing, because I think you're doing an amazing job.
Oh, okay, so let me be a little more specific.
Sure.
Because I have one. Okay, my wife runs a travel blog. She started getting haters for the first time ever in the last couple of months. And
Sure.
she's been publishing the comments, and I keep telling her, you should just delete them.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about your thoughts in terms of, from a community building standpoint.
Sure.
Do you tend to bias people in early community building efforts to say, hey, be transparent, let people be open with this stuff, it'll build and engender more trust and more following? Or do you say, get rid of that stuff, it has no place?
It depends a little bit upon what your goals are. What I would say in that situation is that these are the rules. We don't want people that are going to do that, and you're not a good fit for that community. What a lot of people tend to do in the community space is that they spend an incredible amount of time going through first warning, second warning, third warning to remove someone from a group. But that doesn't make sense. To me, if someone's not a good fit for that community, they might not be an awful human being, but if they're not a good fit for that group, then my focus is on what's best for that community, not on that individual. So I'm more than happy just to remove them. We generally want to spend as little time as possible on the negative parts of that group, if that makes sense. And because there's an opportunity cost to all the time. So it's far better to spend that time focusing on the things that will improve the community in the future, having content or interviews with amazing people, writing great content, inviting 10 amazing people to join the community. That's all going to be a better use of time. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.